that he has just laid out the opponent's playbook. The ways in which he's going to deceive humanity. Now, here's what we have to understand with that. Because what we don't want to do is limit what's going on. Which is why, let me write this up on the board, when it comes to the different areas, hedonism, materialism, it is the intellectualism. I want y'all to understand that. It's this one right here. See, as was mentioned in the previous segment, through intellectualism, justification is going to be given to hedonism and materialism. But not only that, it is through the intellectualism that you're going to get another Messiah, you're going to get another spirit, you're going to get another message. Okay? We're going to see an example of that. Well, let me write these subcategories down here so you understand where we're coming from. Under intellectualism, we have religion, we have philosophy, and we have science. Okay? Now here's the interesting thing about that. World religion, world philosophy, world science. There is some truth intertwined in each of these areas. Okay? There's some truth. Why is there some truth? Because they are all pulling from an original source. A lot of times people like to say everybody's, the Bible is plagiarizing all of the other religions. That's not the case. Although you got a majority of people who believe that, the truth of the matter is the religions and the philosophies and the scientists of the world are actually pulling from Holy Scripture. And when I say Holy Scripture, what people are going to say is that, well, the Bible came into existence this time and that time. No. Let's go back. Okay? Let's go back to the beginning. Let's go back to a man named Hanuk or Enoch, who had a relationship with the Most High, who received revelation from the Most High. Let's go back to the time of Noah, who had a relationship with the Most High, who had an understanding of how to live righteously before the Most High. And this was before the flood. This is one of the reasons why Noah found grace in the eyes of the Most High, because of how he was living. This is before there was any other nation. This is before even the world was divided up the way that it is now by way of continents. This was before all of that. These men had a relationship with the Most High. And then even after the flood, when you get to Abraham, Yitzhak, Yaakov, these men had a relationship with the Most High before Moshe received Torah. Because what people fail to realize, before everything was written, everything was transmitted by word of mouth. Father to son, mother to daughter, teacher to student. This is how his word was transmitted. Otherwise, how could any of these nations be judged for committing sin? Sin had to have existed. But what people don't understand is that the Torah, as was given to Moshe in its fullness, didn't exist then, but there were various aspects of the Torah that did exist. Okay? God willing, at some point we can get into that. That's a whole other discussion. That's a whole other lesson. That's a whole other study. But let's focus on where we are right now. Okay? Point being is this. When he says, for if he who comes preaches another Yahushua whom we didn't preach, or if you receive a different spirit which you didn't receive, or a different good news which you didn't accept, you put up with that well enough. Intellectualism, by religion, philosophy, science, okay, it gives us another Messiah. And don't just focus on the Messiah in a religious aspect. Think about a Messiah in the context of how people look at a messianic person today. somebody who is a great leader, who is very charismatic and has inspiration to the point where people follow them. Okay? And the spirit, all you have to look at is the various thoughts that are circulating in our world today. And as far as doctrine, pick one. Okay? But let's move on. What we want to do, now from this point on, Brother Shaw will start to deal with something else. But when you get down to verse 13, he picks back up with this thought. So what we're going to do, I'm going to read verse 4, and then I'm going to jump to verse 13 so you can get that complete thought. So he said, for if he who comes preaches another Yahushua, whom we didn't preach, or if you receive a different spirit, which you didn't receive, or a different good news, which you didn't accept, you put up with that well enough. For such men are false apostles, deceitful workers, masquerading as Messiah's apostles. Stop right there. Think about that. So you're going to have a group of men who are going to, if you can just imagine for a moment, masquerading. In other words, they're going to put on the costume. They're going to appear to be representatives of the Messiah because of that. And I'm just using putting on a costume because when we think about a masquerade ball, in a masquerade ball, people often have masks and costumes, and they appear as something, you know, some type of character or some type of person, etc. So the person or the character that they're putting on is one of what it says here, Messiah's apostles. But listen to what he says next, verse 14. And no wonder, for even the opponent masquerades as an angel of light. Now, hold on to that thought, and let's go back to the idea now of the stork. Chasida, representing kindness. Go back to the thought about the gear eagle or vulture. Rachama, representing compassion. Think about that. Okay? Listen to what he says. Verse 15. It is no great thing, therefore, if his servants, listen to that, his ministers. What this is teaching us is that the opponent has a movement. What we don't want to limit this movement to is religion. It's not just religion, it's philosophy. It's not just philosophy, it's science. These are the big three ideas that are circulating under the banner of intellectualism today. These are the big three. And it is by these three that Israel has been scattered. And when I say scattered, I'm talking about in their mind. It is by those big three that Israel has been confounded or confused. Okay? Go back to why he said, Babylon, you are the head of gold. You're the brainchild. You're the orchestrator. And what did we learn about Babylon? It was started by Nimrod. Remember? Continued rebellion. And what did he do? He prompted people to build a tower that get the attention of the Most High, who came down and as a result of that confounded the languages. As a result of that, why as a result of that? Because they were already confounded in their mind. So now what the Most High simply did with the languages is he now manifests what was happening to them spiritually. They were already that way. Listen to what he says. Verse 15 again. It is no great thing, therefore, if his servants also masquerade as servants of righteousness. They're not actually servants of righteousness. They just dress up that way. When you hear them speak, they sound like they're righteous. You see? But let's go back to something else. He says to beware of the false prophet. false prophet, false prophets, right? He says, outwardly, they look like they're sheep, but inwardly, they are ravening wolves. And what comes to mind is an old cartoon. I think it may have been like an old Bugs Bunny type cartoon, where you had the wolf trying to get in to get the sheep, and what the wolf did, he put on this costume to make himself look like a sheep. But he actually still looked like the wolf, and they just put this little thing on him just to show you, or to give the implication that he's trying to look like a sheep to get in among the sheep. This is exactly what has happened in our world today. See, in order for the adversary or the opponent's plan to work, he has to have some semblance of righteousness. Okay? He has to. He has to have some semblance of representing the truth. So now, when you go back to these different areas, hedonism, materialism, intellectualism, right? See, all of that falls under the category of the seed of the serpent. Let's not lose sight of that either. You know, as we go through our willing, we're going to put these things together so we can see the big picture of exactly what's happening in the world today. All right? So, moving along. Okay? Here's a question. Considering what it is that we just discussed, right? If we couple the unclean spirit mimicking kindness and compassion, right, with intellectualism, what would we get as a result? Think about that. Pray about that. Meditate on that. If we couple the unclean spirits mimicking kindness and compassion with intellectualism, what would we get as a result? What would be the outcome of that? What will that combination produce, in other words? All right? Well, let's move along. Let's go to the letter Brother Sower wrote to the assembly in Ephesus. So this will be Ephesians chapter 6, starting at verse 10. This is the last passage. Or we're going to, interject other passages in support and look at a few other terms, but this is the last passage. So, Ephesians chapter 6, verse 10. Listen to what it says. Finally, be strong in Adonai and in the strength of his might. Put on the whole armor of Elohim, that you may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. Now, that word wiles, right? Right here in the Greek lexicon 3180. If you look at the term methodeia, you can already see the word method. Okay? In other words, let's go back. He says that you may be able to stand against the methods of the devil, right? But the word itself, right? If you look it up, it's a compound term, but it says traveling over. That is travesty. The word travesty means an exaggerated or grotesque imitation. Once again, the word travesty means an exaggerated or grotesque imitation. But then it has, next to travesty, it has trickery. Trickery means act or procedure intended to achieve an end by deceptive or fraudulent means. I'm going to read it again. The definition for trickery. Act or procedure intended to achieve an end by deceptive or fraudulent means. Method. The definition of the term method. The following or pursuing of an orderly and technical procedure in the handling of a subject. When he says that you may be able to stand against the methods of the devil, what is he referring to? The word method again. The following or pursuing of an orderly and technical procedure in the handling of a subject. When we get down to the bare minimum of what it is that the adversary has done, and we're going to see that as we go along, Abba, when he shows us these things, he makes it very clear to us in this world system, the entire system is the adversary system. This world system, it's, if you can go back and if you can just consider from the first two that he gained the mastery over it. And hold on to that word, because we're going to see something else in a moment. The first two, Adam, Hawa, Adam and Eve, right? And all their offspring, with the exception being those who come out of her, my people. See, although that's something that's written in the book of Revelation, the last book and what we have as far as the library we call Holy Scripture. Come out of her, my people, right? That you be not partakers of our plague. Isn't that the exact same call and cry that has been going out since the dawn of humanity? Come out of her, my people. What do you think he taught Enoch about? What do you think he was teaching Noah about? What do you think him telling Abraham to leave his house, his father's house, his kindred, their land? What do you think he told him to leave that for? It was always a call to come out. What do you think was going on when he brought Israel up and out of Egypt? It has always been that. Because the world system at large is orchestrated by the adversary, by the opponent. That's why he can tempt the Messiah with that and say, all these things have been delivered to me. Does he still have that power? Of course he doesn't have that power. Mashiach said after he continued, or after he completed his sacrificial work, he said, all power in the heavens and the earth belong to me now. But what the problem is, what we're discussing. Why is it that the world is still in such disarray? If all the power in the heavens and the earth now belong to Yahushua HaMashiach. I'll tell you why. Because the majority of the world is still caught up into the religion, the philosophy, the science that has been established here. That's why. And at the same time, all these areas, what are they doing? They are stamping on and they are tearing down the truth. But they're not destroying it. You know why? This is why Israel was created. This is why Israel exists. To be the spokespersons of the Most High. And whoever has an ear to hear, let him hear. But let's continue, because we got a few more things we want to look at. So again, he says, to put on the whole armor of Elohim, that you may be able to stand against the methods of the devil. For our wrestling is not against flesh and blood. See, what the opponent got us doing, he got us hating on one another. Look at the division in the world today. It could be black versus white, right? And people now, what do they use? They use religion, philosophy, and science to justify that. No, he created human beings. It doesn't make a difference the color of your skin. People are going to try to use, again, religion, philosophy, science, and make it about that. It's not about that. It's not about that. He created Adam, a human being. He created from Adam, Hawa, another human being. One was a male, one was a female. From these two, every human being is a result. We are the result of that man, that woman. We all are here. It doesn't make a difference whether your skin color is black, brown, white. It doesn't make a difference. You see? But in order to keep us divided through intellectualism, the opponent is able to make it seem that's what it's about. And we have become so ingrained with that mindset that it has become the reality of many people out there, and they don't let it go. Which is why you see it growing. Even in religions, you see it growing. He says, For our wrestling is not against flesh and blood. But if it's not against one another, what is it against? The first thing he says, but against the principalities. What does he mean by that? Our next word in the Greek lexicon, 746, the word is arche, right? Arche. Now the term, it says, as an abstract, it means commencement. Commencement means the beginning, okay? The beginning. But then it also represents the chief. Why is that? Because the beginning of something is oftentimes considered to be the chief, right? But when you look at the term arche, the word arche is where you get the term arch from, as in an archangel. That's not by coincidence, okay? So you have, in other words, you have chiefs. Now, when you do a research and go a little further into this term, what you find is that it is representing various applications of order, time, place, or rank among the angels or demons. When it says demons, it's talking about unclean spirits or the fallen angels, okay? So that's the indication. Because if it's not flesh and blood, what's the opposite of flesh and blood? Let's continue. He says, but against the principalities, against the powers, right? Our next term, number 8149 in the Greek lexicon, exousia. What does it mean? Force, mastery. You're talking about entities who have just that. Let me read some more of this. It says, it's derived from another term, 1832, if you want to look that up. It says, in the sense of ability, privilege. That is, it says subjectively, force, capacity, competency, freedom, or objectively, mastery. And then it says concretely, a magistrate, superhuman, potentate, token of control. In other words, those invested with power, the celestial and infernal powers, angels, archangels, or demons. We're not battling with the angels per se, because the angels are still on our side. But remember, that fabulous serpent, his tail drew, meaning, imagine this being the tail, drew a third of the stars. Now they're in league with him. They have become his angels. Okay? So that when he did what he did, not only was he cast out, his angels were cast out with him. Okay? So they have power. Right? He says, against the world's rulers of the darkness of this age. Now, our next term, number 2888 in the Greek lexicon, compound word, cosmocrator, right? Cosmocrator, right? What does it mean? You put the two words, the word cosmos means world, and the word kratio means to hold. So in other words, it means to hold the world. In other words, you're talking about being a world ruler. Take your mind back now. When Daniel prayed and fasted for 21 days, and that angel finally came to him, he said, the day you set your face before the Most High, your prayer was answered, but I was withstood by the prince of Persia. He's not talking about a man withstanding him. He's talking about that evil spirit that is over the man, the actual prince of Persia. When he says, I want you to take out a proverb for the king of Babylon. But then later on, it goes into, how are you fallen from heaven? Hillel ben Shachar. He moved away from talking about that actual man and began to focus on the spirit that was dealing with that man. Same thing when he said to take out a lamentation for the prince of TORAH or Zoar. He eventually gets down there and talks about how he was perfect in his creation. He calls him the anointed cherub that covers. He's not talking about the prince of Zoar right now. He's talking about the entity that is now over Zoar. So when you get down to this word, cosmocrator, that's why it says world rulers. They have influence and sway over the world rulers. Every world ruler. Okay? Every world ruler. What about the righteous world ruler? Name a righteous world ruler. Name one. The only righteous world rulers that and not even a world ruler, but the righteous rulers that we had was of the kingdom of Israel. the likes of a Dawid, the likes of a Shlomo, until he even became corrupted. You see? And the likes of the other kings of Yahudah that were righteous. Not all of them were, but a few. Very few. Message. You can see even in the history of Israel how they were being motivated by unclean spirits. Okay? Even in our own history. But let's keep going. He says, and against the spiritual forces of wickedness in the heavenly places. What is he talking about? That word, next term, 4152, pneumaticos, ethereal, supernatural, spiritual. Yet, if we're not wrestling against flesh and blood, what are we wrestling against? We're wrestling against something that is ethereal, something that is supernatural. We have an enemy that we, in our carnal state, we can't see. We can't see that enemy. The only way we can even see the enemy, we first have to have that relationship with the Most High, and on top of that, the Most High now has to give